So welcome and thank you for joining us for today's event, the Sharif Bassiouni Memorial Lecture. My name is Siham Rashid, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jerusalem Fund, in which the Palestine Center is the program of, and this event falls under today. We invited individuals, including Mr. Abdin Jabara, who knew Mr. Bassiouni well, to be with us today. Unfortunately, they were not able to join us, but asked us to share some information on his life and activism with you today. Mahmoud Sharif Bassiouni was an Egyptian American born in Cairo on December 9, 1937. His father was an Egyptian diplomat. His grandfather, a president of the Egyptian Senate, fought during Egypt's 1919 revolt against the British occupation. He also played his own role in the wars and rebellions in Egypt. He was studying law in France when the Suez Crisis broke out in 1956, and Professor Bassiouni returned home to fight against the combined Israeli, British, and French attack on Egypt. More importantly, Professor Bassiouni became a law professor who helped create the International Criminal Court in 1998. After having spent decades investigating human rights abuses from apartheid-era South Africa to the former Yugoslavia. Professor Bassiouni was often called the father of international criminal law. Although his more than 24 books and 256 scholarly articles touched on subjects including citizens' arrests, juvenile delinquency, international extradition, and the Islamic criminal justice system. In addition to his intellectual output, Professor Bassiouni conducted over 20 UN inquiries and commissions. Although he never served as a UN judge or prosecutor, his reports carefully weighed the evidence, some of which he had collected himself at risk to his own life. Professor Bassiouni was appointed chairman of a United Nations commission charged with researching the crimes during the Yugoslav wars. He led a team that gathered evidence that would later be used to indict military and political leaders, such as Radovan Karadzic, I'm sure I slayed his name, a Bosnian Serb convicted of genocide and other charges in 2016. In 2011, he chaired a commission of inquiry set up by the King of Bahrain to investigate the killings and torture of protesters. His 500-page report, produced in 5 months, condemned the culture of impunity that had come about through failures in the local judiciary and in military courts. As a result, several thousand detainees were released. Among Professor Bassiouni's distinctions and awards were the nomination to the Nobel Peace Prize in 1999, the Special Award for the Council of Europe in 1990, the Defender of Democracy Award Parliamentarians for Global Action in 1998, the St. Vincent de Paul Humanitarian Award from DePaul University in 2000, the Hague Prize for International Law in 2007, and many, many more. Professor Bassiouni helped found the International Human Rights Law Institute at DePaul University in Chicago, where he taught since 1964. In 1972, he founded the Siracusa International Institute for Criminal Justice and Human Rights, which was a training and research organization in Sicily. At the same time, Professor Bassiouni was fighting against Operation Boulder, a US intelligence gathering and surveillance program launched in 1972, specifically targeting Arab American leaders and organizations. While surveillance of Arab Americans did not begin with Operation Boulder, the program exposed the federal government's ethnic discrimination and political racism as described by Pamela Pennock's research titled From 1967 to Operation Boulder, the erosion of Arab American civil civil liberties in the 1970s. In the most prominent examples, one of the most prominent examples, the federal government began a surveillance operation on Arab American attorney Habdina Jbara, who knew Professor Bassiouni very well. Habdina Jbara was born in Michigan. He was a graduate of the University of Michigan, and who was at that time a prominent leader of the Association of Arab American University Graduates. Through the trial's discovery process, Jbara found that both the FBI and the National Security Administration had been gathering intelligence on his political activities since 1967. According to Professor Bassiouni, in the 1970s, the FBI began investigating nearly all of the leaders of the Arab American University graduates, surveillance that in some cases lasted for many years. However, in the face of widespread violations of their civil liberties, many Arab Americans developed a deeper sense of their Arab identity and community consciousness. Once the federal government began treating anyone with Arab heritage as a suspect, more Arab Americans realized that, as Elaine Hagopian states, they were somehow involved. Likewise, in his book about the Nixon administration's special measures, Bassiouni observed, quote, "What was intended to drive the Arab Americans underground and silence their opposition to US foreign policy caused them to become more united and vocal. This time, however, it was not only in opposition to US foreign policy, but also to a facet of its internal policy," unquote. This shift marked the beginning of the Arab American civil rights movement and heightened activism on behalf of their own rights in the United States, and tied it to their activism on behalf of the Palestinian cause, thus creating a wider space for transnational political expression, as evidenced by today's event. Professor Bassiouni passed away on September 25, 2017. He is survived by his wife, Elaine Clement Bassiouni, and by a stepdaughter and 2 grandchildren. Professor Bassiouni named the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development as one of the 4 institutions equally benefiting from his significant estate, for which the Jerusalem Fund's board, staff, and ultimate beneficiaries of his generosity will forever be grateful. I would now like to introduce our moderator for today's event, Dr. Osama Khalil. Dr. Khalil is Associate Professor of History at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. But before I turn it over to Professor Khalil, I would like to announce that on October 19th, we will have our first in-person event since the start of COVID. The event under our culture program is a book reading and discussion with the authors of Light in Gaza. Please visit our website at thejerusalemfund.org and follow us on Twitter at the Palestine Center to stay updated on our events and activities. So thank you for being with us today, and I turn it over to Professor Khalil.
Thank you, Siham. Thanks to the Jerusalem Fund and the Palestine Center for hosting this important and timely event. I, of course, want to thank Siham and Firas for their help in organizing.
Firas.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
for their help in organizing. It wouldn't be possible without them. Dr. Bassiouni dedicated his life to human rights and was deeply committed to equality and justice for Palestinians and the Palestinian cause. And this is exemplified in the daily work of our guest today. Since 2006, Sahar Francis is an attorney and has been the general director of Ramallah-based Ad-Damir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, a Palestinian NGO providing legal and advocacy support to Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli and Palestinian prisons. She has over 16 years of human rights experience, including human rights counseling and representation. Ms. Francis was also on the board of Defense for Children International, Palestine section for 4 years, and currently sits on the board of the Union of Agricultural Work Committees. Mr. Islam Neirouch is Director of the Programs and Projects Department of the Union of Agricultural Work Committees. He's an agronomist and agricultural development expert with a BS and MS in plant protection. Mr. Neirouch has been with the union since 2006 and is an expert in the field of beekeeping, land development, and water resources sector, climate change, and a member of different national committees. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us. I thought if we could, Ms. Francis, for you to present first, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for the Jerusalem Fund for inviting me to share in this memorial event. It's really on the personal level very important for me because Mr. Bassiouni, Professor Bassiouni, was an inspiration for me as a lawyer 20 years or maybe more than 20 years ago when I decided to start working as a human rights lawyer in the occupied territories and started to deal with the international criminal law. And then it gave me hope that maybe one day we can really seek accountability and find the perpetrators of torture, arbitrary detention, unfair trial procedures, and all related war crimes and crimes against humanity that were systematically committed against the Palestinian prisoners, the vulnerable group I worked with via my work in Damir, could happen one day and could be real if we really manage to use the system that Mr. Bassiouni spent decades of his professional life fighting for and pushing for via the International Criminal Court or all the other investigating committees by the UN that he was sharing in. So it's really an honor today to be included in this event. So Damir, actually a Palestinian organization that was founded in the latest years of the first Intifada in late 1991 in order to offer legal aid for Palestinian prisoners arrested by the occupation, prosecuted in front of the military system. And since then, we developed to include documentation, monitoring, advocacy, raising awareness, but we kept the main focus on the issue of the Palestinian political prisoners. Unfortunately, after the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, after the Oslo Agreement, also political imprisonment started to be in the internal discourse, and we are following as well political prisoners cases on the PA side. But today we will focus about the prisoners under the occupation and the work of Damir. We were doing this work for more than 30 years now. And in these 30 years, we were facing lots of restrictions, harassment, attacks, and smear campaigns and by the Israeli occupation in different levels, in different ways. It didn't started just last year when they decided to designate Damir with all the other 6 Palestinian organizations as terrorist organizations in October 2021. The attack by the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian civil society has a long history, actually. It started with the occupation, when the occupation started to impose their military system by the military orders, thousands of military orders and the military courts that intervene and control all of our daily life, from the educational level, health sector, agriculture, human rights, development, economy. All the different aspects are controlled by this military system, actually in a way that it protects the interest of the occupiers and not implementing the international humanitarian law, especially the 4th Geneva Convention, with all the protection that it guarantees for the people under occupation. And by implementing the military orders with the British security regulations, actually they kept the power in their hand to control the civil life of the Palestinian people by the ability to declare about any group student group, union, political party, organizations, charitable organizations, and so on as illegal entity if they claim that they have enough secret information that they can argue that this entity, this group is affecting the security of the state. This is how it worked, with the use of a very vague language about what could be considered a threat to the security, what it means, the security of the state, how a charitable organization can affect the security of the state. And actually, Israel made a huge use of the September 11th attacks in the United States context in 2001, when the US started this war against terrorism. I argue that Israel played a huge role in developing the paradigm, the laws, the strategies, the plans, how we can actually use these events in order to control and shrink the space for the civil society. And this is how the theory of terrorism is not alone. Terrorists are not working as individuals. They are definitely supported by their societies. And this is how all these regulations and restrictions under the name of the anti-terror treaties that were developed in the global level were starting to evolve and to be used, not just in our context in the Palestinian occupied territories, but in all the other conflict areas. And even in democratic countries, such regulations were used in order to control opposition and criticism against the government. So Israel declared hundreds of Palestinian NGOs, including all the political parties, as illegal organizations, as terrorist organizations since the early 70s. And it depends on their interest. So for example, after the Oslo Agreement, in order to set a political fact that the PA has no authority in the Jerusalem city, they shut down more than 48 organizations, including the Orient House, the representative organization for the PLO at that time, and they stopped their work inside Jerusalem in order to force the fact that Jerusalem is the capital of the state of Israel. Hundreds of organizations, including sport organizations, cultural centers, TVs, radios, and student movements, political parties were declared these years as illegal organizations. Of course, this campaign increased significantly after the decision on the ICJ on 2004 on the wall, and the finding of the PDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign by the Palestinian civil society, and the call for the sanctions and divestment, basically. This is when we started to feel that Israel is attacking more and more, because again, we were trying to exhaust the international system for the accountability question. And when we started to approach the ICC, the International Criminal Court, after the PA ratified the treaty in 2014, it escalated. The attack against the Palestinian civil society were really shifting for new strategies. They were very keen in silencing and shutting down the work of the Palestinian organizations, especially those who worked in the sensitive areas. Like I'm sure my colleague Islam will talk about the work of the OAC on the agriculture and how it's connected to the lands area C and the project of the annexation, and in other areas on the health sector and the support for the people, the vulnerable communities to resist and stay in their villages and in their lands. On the level of the prisoners, it was very important our work on the level of the torture, and considering the torture one of the most serious war crimes that fits under the jurisdiction of the ICC, with the arbitrary detention, the practice of the administrative detention, currently, there's a hunger strike led by the detainees against the policy of the administrative detention. But basically, administrative detention as it used by the Israeli occupation is amounting to arbitrary detention. This is also considered a war crime under the ICC. The transfer of the prisoners, all the prisoners are held in prisons inside Israel. This is by itself violates the Rome Statute and considered as a war crime. The fact that the military court system that was imposed since 67 till today is not guaranteeing a fair trial procedure. This is another war crime under the International Criminal Court. Damir and other human rights organizations working on the issue of the ICC and the issue of the prisoners, like Defense for Children, for example, we were submitting cases to the International Criminal Court. We were joining the PDS campaign in our advocacy in the support of the prisoners, trying to affect international corporations like G4S, the security company that was complicit with the occupation in affording facilities and technical technologies and to the prisons. And we were calling for boycotting this company and asking them to divest from the prison business inside the occupation state. And it succeeded. I think this is the kind of work that caused the Israelis to intensify their attack against us as human rights organizations. And of course, in 2012, they raided the Damir office, they stole computers and destroyed files and property. In 2019, they raided the office again and they stole computers and files and information. In 21, when they designated us, actually, it didn't came with physical attack. It was just the designation. Just last August, in the 18th of August, they raided the offices of all the 7 organizations. And maybe we can elaborate more about the legal aspects and the case and how it was affecting our work as well as organizations. The fact that we as individuals would be affected by the fact that our organizations were designated, because each and every one of us could be arrested any moment and facing charges of being member in illegal organization or a terrorist organization. It's by itself can cause a sentence for up to 12 months or 16 months or even more than that, as in the case of Ms. Shada Audi and Khwani Rishmawi and all the other colleagues, that they were already sentenced for being working in the health work committees. So the impact of such a step, the designation and all the other consequences, it could be a very serious damage for the Palestinian civil society, because if the case of the 7 organizations will succeed, if Israel will really succeed in shutting us down and silencing us, this means it will continue. This is also would be a bad example in the international level, because if the international community is going to agree that Israel can act in this way, why Russia, why other countries, why China, why the United States, why Spain, why all the other countries cannot do the same? So it's a serious problem for the whole human rights and civil society actors in the global level. It's not just about the occupied territories. Thank you. And of course, we can have more details on the discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Neruch, do you want to follow up and present on the union?
Okay. Good evening, all. And I would like to thank Jocelyn Fund for organizing this event. I would like to mention that AWAC was established in 1986 as a response for the Israeli violation against the Palestinian people, especially the small-scale farmers who lack the main source of life due to the Israeli theft of the Palestinian land, water resources, and energy. Our work mainly in targeting the small-scale farmers and the marginalized poor families. Sorry. And also, it's working on empowering women and cooperatives. Our working in both the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and it used to have around 60 staff before the designation of our work and the closure. Our work throughout the local agricultural committees. The name came local agricultural work committees because we have local agricultural committees representing the farmers and their needs in different areas. Sorry, I have to cut just 1 minute.
While we're waiting, why don't I?
Okay, so sorry. Okay. I would like to mention that after Oslo Agreement, and we know that the Oslo Agreement divided Palestine in different areas, A, B, C, where area C is the agricultural area, okay? And it represents around 70% of the 63% of the agricultural land is located in area C. And all the farmers are located in area C. Sorry. Okay. They are located in area C, and they don't have the basic resources for practicing their agriculture. They don't have water, they don't have electricity, and even they are always attacked by the Israeli occupation.
I think we lost Islam. Sahar, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I think his connection got cut off. While we're waiting for him to rejoin, do you mind if I pick up on a point that you raised? And I think it's really important.
Oh, definitely.
You talked about in 2012 and 2019, the offices were raided. They were raided again in August of 2022. What is the actual impact here of on the organization and the work you're doing on a daily level? Not only just the consistent harassment, the raids, the stealing of files, the stealing of computers. How does this impact the work your organization is doing? How do you overcome this? And you're forced to overcome this very frequently. I mean, this is, and it's deliberate, and these are attacks in the middle of the night often. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I want to follow up on another point you made about the designation, the impact of the designation.
Yes, sure. Like even back in 2012, and this is why I mentioned that the whole issue of the war on terror was strategized together, I believe, between Israel and the United States. Because even back in 2012, without us being designated or anything concrete against the Damir, immediately after the raid, the Arab Bank in Palestine closed our bank account because of the fact that the army raided our office. And nothing helped in supporting the Damir, and several other organizations were raided in the same time, in the same night with the Damir back in 2012 and in other periods. And all of us were forced, around 40 organizations were forced to shut down our accounts in the Arab Bank because of the raid. And it impacted the individuals even. Some of the staff were arrested. Some of the staff were banned travel outside the country. Some of the staff needed permits to go for family issues or healthcare issues. inside Israel, even in East Jerusalem, and they were denied entry. So the impact is not just on the organization as an organization. Of course, every time the office is raided, we would feel as individuals very vulnerable. It's very stressful period till you feel that, okay, you can go back to normal work. This is also affects the relation with the families of the prisoners, because families and prisoners would be also worried and afraid what would be the consequences if we appoint a lawyer from Damir, if we go to the office of Damir to seek a legal aid, is it gonna be with bad impact on us? So it was repeated again, of course, stealing the information, and especially sensitive cases of torture, of child detainees, of women detainees that they were in some cases sexually harassed. This is all put our work under a threat, and we don't know how the security would use such information that they compromised and they took from our computers or from our database that I'm sure in the raid last August, it was seriously compromised. I hope it will not be misused, but we are not sure yet how serious was the technical point of the raid in August 2022.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think one of the questions that will come up from an American audience, what is the legal recourse for the organizations that have been designated? What is the legal recourse in the Israeli courts? How has there been a response? And what can you do after each raid, particularly when they're using information they may gather and then presenting it as secret evidence against your clients or against other clients? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so maybe I should start by explaining a bit the legal system that we were subjected to. In 2016, in 2016, Israel legalized the anti-terror law, a civil law inside Israel. And in the occupied territories, we are supposed to be subjected for the military orders, not the Israeli civil system, not the Israeli laws. What they did in our case for the first time ever in 2021, they declared us as terrorist organizations based on the civil system, on the civil law, the Israeli. Actually, they implemented the Israeli civil law in the occupied territories. This is annexation. The state of Israel as an occupying country cannot implement their own. They don't have jurisdiction to use their laws in the occupied territories. So they violated the international law and they declared us according to the civil law. According to the anti-terror law, we were supposed to submit our first appeal to the commission, the special commission that advised the security minister, because he's the one that signs the designation order. And this committee should review our arguments with the secret information that they have, and then they will present their opinion to the minister. We decided not to be involved in this process. And for a long time, all of us, the 6 organizations, were not submitting our appeal to the commission. Later on, 3 of us, Al-Haq, Defense for Children, and OAC, they did submitted their appeal to the commission. Till today, there was no hearing with a full substance. There was an initial hearing between the legal team that represents the 3 organizations in front of the committee. The committee insisted to keep all the material as secret. Imagine how you would defend yourself as an organization if you don't know what's the evidences against you. This is a serious allegations against us that we are involved in money fraud, in money supporting terrorism by financing a terrorist organization. Can you imagine that we have to defend ourselves based on secret information in such cases? What it means if it don't, like how I'm supposed to defend myself as an organization without knowing the exact specific evidences against me? After 3 weeks after the minister designation, because we claimed from the first day that this is illegal because you don't have jurisdiction, 3 weeks later, the military governor in the occupied territories used the military orders in order to declare us as illegal organizations, not terrorists, illegal entities, according to the military orders system. In this system, we have the right to appeal, but to whom appeal? To the same person that issued the order against us. But we, before appealing, actually, we requested the military governor to disclose the secret information. Couple of months after, he claimed, like he enabled us to take the open material, which was the file, actually, the charges and the evidences that they were presented in the case of the healthcare committees, not relevant to the other 6 organizations. And we were presented with this material as this is the only open, relevant material that they can share with us. We insisted to get the secret information and they refused. So we appealed his decision and we never received a proper answer till the night of the 17th of August, couple of hours before the physical raid to the 7 offices of the organizations. Our legal team, like in our case, Damir, Bisan, and the Women's Center, we're represented by Adala Legal Center inside, like in Haifa. They received a fax from the military governor, maybe around 7 p.m., that they are rejecting our appeal, and the offices were raided after midnight in the 18th, like early hours of the morning of the 18th. How you can trust such illegal procedures if it's done in this way, and if it's all built on secret information? How you are supposed to guarantee a fair procedures in order to exhaust procedures and to prove that you are not involved in such allegations?
I want to pick up on a point you made about legal annexation. So we all remember that there was in 2020 and 2021 that then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made it very clear, even 2019, 2020, that he intended to annex the West Bank. And this takes us to that. So I want to give a little bit of a broader context and see if you agree. Now, part of the normalization agreements, particularly with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, was that this was preventing annexation. And yet what we see with your organization, the other organizations, is that a illegal annexation has occurred in which Israeli civil law is being applied to the occupied territories, which were previously governed, to your point, under military law. And we're seeing that they're in fact the same law. Would you agree with that from a legal perspective, that they're effectively the same law, whether it's military or civil? Palestinians have no rights and no recourse?
Yeah, they're actually not just on the context of the organizations and the anti-terror law. We can analyze aspects of legal annexation actually in other issues. For example, the policy of house demolitions and how they enforce demolishing houses, especially in Area C, based on the claim that the owners didn't succeeded to guarantee the permit for building their houses. We, as I said, under the international humanitarian law, people under occupation, they have special set of law. It's the IHL, the international humanitarian law, that should be implemented in the occupied territories. And one of the main bases for such system is that the system or the occupying power should guarantee the development, the interests of the people under occupation, not the interest of the state. So in the housing issues, Israel were supposed all these 50 years to develop plans for the villages in order to develop according to the development of the people, of the community in each village. Israel, instead of this, trying to squeeze every Palestinian village in Area C by this policy of not enabling people to have proper planning zones and permits to build, and they demolish their houses. So people have no other choice but either to run away to the cities, to the main cities, to Ramallah, Beit Lahem, Nablus, or to squeeze in very inhuman conditions. And this is how people looks for immigrate, like to leave the country. And this is how they will control Area C with much less people, with less Palestinian people. Not just this, they couple of years, like 4 years or 5 years ago, they amended the military orders in relation to the housing and the licensing and all the planning subject to the district court in Jerusalem, to a civil court. They moved it from the jurisdiction of the military committee under the military court system to a civil court inside Jerusalem. Why? Under which international law you, as an occupying power, have the authority to give such cases to the civil system in your country? It's a violation for the international law, for the IHL. And this is why we are claiming, and this is one example. About other examples we can discuss about how they manipulate the military legal system in order to promote their interests and to enable them to control us and to grab more land and to confiscate more land and to continue with the construction of the settlements. And this is how they will impose the annexation plan that you mentioned, that was raised by Netanyahu. It's taking place every day on the ground, physically by the actions and legally by the system that is developed and in a way that it protects such interests, such political actions.
I thought if we could, I'd like us to take a step back for the audience and talk about the human impact. The prisoners you represent, the prisoners you work with. If you could give us an overview on the number of prisoners, and because this is also, to your point, I'm hoping we can go in two directions with this. One is to talk about the prisoners, but also talk about the risk to you and your organization and the members of your organization who can now be targeted in the same way because you've been labeled as members of an illegal organization or of a terrorist organization. So I thought maybe to give an overview for the audience about the different, especially the different groups that are represented, the hunger strike you mentioned earlier that's ongoing, the children who are imprisoned. If I'll turn it over to you as the expert.
Yes, so also the issue of imprisonment was one of the main tools that the occupation used systematically to control the Palestinian population in the occupied territories. Because the statistics, the total number of the prisoners differs from time to time according to the what's going on the ground and according to the plans of the occupation state. So currently, there's 4,640 Palestinian prisoners in the Israeli prisons. Out of them, there's 780 administrative detainees, 32 women, around 180 children under 18. But the significant increase in the administrative detention use in the last year were very clear, because in the last couple of years, the total number in one current moment for the administrative detainees were around 400, 450, and it started to increase since the beginning of the year, while the detainees were boycotting the military court procedures as an act of resistance against this policy of the administrative detention, because I'm sure you're aware that several individuals in the last couple of years, they were initiating their individual hunger strike against the policy of administrative detention, because it's a very harsh experience to be arrested for indefinite period without knowing the reason why you are arrested. It's based on secret information, without knowing how you are supposed to defend yourself to go out of prison. What's the defense that you should present to the court so you would be released? The administrative detention amounts to psychological torture. This is how the Committee Against Torture described the practice of administrative detention. This is why detainees are very keen in resisting and opposing administrative detention policy. So the boycott actually lasted for 6 months. Unfortunately, wasn't succeeding in putting a limit to the use or affecting the policy of administrative detention. And this is why we had the cases, the individual cases like Khalil Awaudi, the latest individual who were in hunger strike for 6 months. And by the way, he was supposed to be released on the 2nd of October. He's not released till today. And they were extending his detention, claiming that there's a new case that he should be investigated on, and maybe he would be charged. Seriously, why you waited? Why you waited till the last day of the administrative detention? Why you didn't investigate it before? This is an example how they are misusing the laws that enables administrative detention to be used in the occupied territories. So this is what brought the 30 detainees to initiate their hunger strike on the 25th of September. These 30 administrative detainees, 28 of them, they are held in Ofer detention facility near Ramallah. Now they are all isolated in 4 rooms, actually. So they were separated from the other prisoners' community. The other 2, one is held in Hadarim. He's Salah Hammouri, my colleague, a lawyer and a human rights defender, that not just the fact that he's now under administrative detention. Last October, the Israeli Interior Minister decided to revoke his Jerusalem residency based on the claim, again, using secret information, that he broke the allegiance to the state of Israel. Imagine, as a protected person under international law, he shouldn't have any allegiance to the occupying state. Still, Israel requesting Jerusalemite Palestinians to have allegiance to the state, and if not, they will revoke your residency. This is another tool of deportation and affecting the level of population in East Jerusalem, the Palestinians who lives and remains in East Jerusalem. And the other detainee, he's held in Iqti'ud, in a prison in the south. He's also alone and he's under solitary confinement. They canceled all family visits for all of them. They are facing fines as a punishment. They impose fines on them. They are not offering them recreation time out of their rooms that is supposed to be more than 1 hour. So in some cases, it's 1 hour for Salah, and the other guy, there's no recreation. They're restricting the visits even for the lawyers and the Red Cross Committee. And they are trying to isolate them totally and not to enable any solidarity from the other prisoners' movement around in the prison. So like, if there's no negotiations with this group of detainees next week or the days to come, it means that the other prisoners' movement would be joining the strike by different strategies. Like today, Ofer prison, they were sending back meals, the whole prisoners. More than 1,000 prisoners were showing solidarity by refusing to receive food from the prison authority today. Next week, we expect that it would be increasing more and more to include most of the prisons.
Thank you. I'm hoping, I'm wondering if you'll allow me to ask a question about process. So I'm cognizant about our audience, for them to understand where your organization comes in to support prisoners, particularly administrative detention. So, we're using phrases that I want to make sure the audience understands. So it is 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm arrested by Israeli soldiers. They come into my village or into the city. They come to my home. They grab me out of bed. I'm arrested. I'm not told what I'm charged with. The family does not know. Nobody knows. I'm put into a Jeep and I'm taken away. Okay. When does the family come to your office and say, our husband, our son, our daughter was taken, our wife was taken last night. What can you do to help us? As
early as we are open.
So they will come in the next morning.
Immediately. And
Okay.
in some cases, they will call, like, let's say if it's taking place at 5 a.m., sometimes families starts to call at 6 a.m. for the colleagues. Like they know all of the cell phones of the team, especially the lawyers, and not just Damir, for all the other organizations that works with prisoners' issues. Families will always reach out to the lawyers directly or to the organizations. The first step for us would be to try to allocate this person to which detention facility he was taken, whether he's under interrogation under the security service. There's 4 interrogation centers, and all of them, they are inside the state of Israel, again, in violation for the international law. There are several detention facilities under the army or the police in some of the settlements areas where you could be taken, or to one of the main prisons like the Ofer detention facility, where you would be investigated and awaiting to be brought to the judge. According to the military orders, they can keep you in such condition for 96 hours, like 4 days, without first to be brought in front of a judge that can review the reason of your arrest. And of course, as you said, they will never tell you what's the charges against you, why you are arrested. They can start immediately interrogating you, harassing you, using torture, physical torture and psychological torture, without informing you properly what's you're accused of, what you're supposed to answer, which kind of information they are looking for. And if you are under interrogation by the security service, you would be immediately banned lawyer visit. This is a trend. The use of the military orders in order to ban lawyers' visits and legal counseling for people under interrogation is systematic. The majority, more than 90% of the detainees who ends up in interrogation, they would be banned from legal counseling in the phase of the interrogation. This seriously affects the whole procedures later. The fact that they pressure you in order to confess, in order to share information, and honestly, in most of the cases, they will allow us to meet the detainees under interrogation after they already confess. And then this confession obtained by torture would be used as the main evidence in your trial. And this is the objective, fair trial democratic system that they claim that they are implementing. Of course, there's lots of discriminating procedures if you compare between the system, the military court system that is imposed on Palestinians, and the criminal procedures according to the Israeli civil system. There is differences. There is discriminating policies that shows how the state is using the law in order to maintain the control and the oppression over the whole society. in the name of security needs and security threat.
So I thought you made a great point about preventing access to a lawyer already actively under torture, that then you get a confession that's used against you by the time you go to trial, which could be months later. Would you know, one of the things that we take for granted is, of course, that children will be treated differently, that children will not be questioned in front of a parent, that won't be questioned alone without a parent present or without an attorney present. How does this work for Palestinian children who are arrested?
No, a Palestinian children, if he's suspected of being involved, what they define security, he would be treated as an adult without any protection. They amended the military orders in relation to the arrest of juveniles, and they tried to make it similar to the civil system inside Israel, the juvenile system, because they were a lot criticized by the international UN different groups and international actors like lawyers, judges, organizations. And they, because up till 2012, a Palestinian child was defined someone in the age of 16, and everyone who was up, he was treated immediately as an adult. They amended the definition of a child just in 2012. From 1967 till 2012, Palestinian children were considered as young as 16 years old. And this says a lot about the discrimination and the treatment. So children, they could be facing torture. They could be banned lawyer visit, although not for 60 days, but for 40 days. They could be isolated under solitary confinement, the most period of the interrogation, and the confessions that would be taken would be used against them. So the only differences could be when you're less than 14, for example, they have to bring you within 48 hours and not 96 hours. They can interrogate you if you are a child up to 40 days, not up to 60 days, not up to 75 days like in the adults before submitting the charge sheet. It's 40 days for the juveniles. The minor differences is not a sufficient protection when we are talking about arresting a child as young as 14 or 15 and putting him in solitary confinement, interrogating him in such severe conditions of physical and psychological abuse and torture. This could be with a very serious impact. And allow me here to mention the case of Ahmed Manasra, a Palestinian boy that I think he became very famous because of this short video that was leaked from the interrogation, where they were psychologically harassing him, shouting on him, and it was very, very clear how bad was his situation. It's not just this. Ahmed was arrested when he wasn't 14 yet. Ahmed is a Jerusalem resident. They were supposed to implement the Israeli civil system on Ahmed, which means, according to the system at that time, he wasn't supposed to be arrested after submitting his charge sheet because he wasn't 14 yet when he committed the crime. And instead, they changed the whole law because of Ahmed's case. Now it's the Israeli civil law, the criminal law. In the cases of security cases, if you are accused of trying to kill or killing or serious attack, you wouldn't be released even if you are less than 14 years old. This amendment was done because of the case of Ahmed Manasra. Ahmed currently is under solitary confinement. The remaining sentence is less than 2 years. Ahmed ended up with post-traumatic disorder, and he tried to commit suicide inside the prison. This is why he's under solitary confinement. Instead of releasing Ahmed to be treated by his family and supported by his family, they're insisting to keep Ahmed for the last day. He's sentenced for 9 years. He already spent more than 7 years. this is a very serious, severe experience with lots of harassment for the whole generation. Children, when they are facing such arrest, it's a very serious issue. The aim is to affect a whole generation. It's not about security. It's not about really that these children are involved in a very serious threat to the security of the state and endangering the security.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Ahmed's case. It really reveals just the many layers and the Byzantine layers of that Palestinians are forced to endure, which is why I asked if you didn't mind to walk us through the process, not knowing where someone who is arrested is taken, having to go through that process of which prison, where is it, inside Israel, is it a military prison, which security service, of the many security services the Israelis have that is interrogating the individual, how many years, the fact that children, and in Ahmed's case, the application of a variety of laws that they can change at any moment to apply to a child, and to claim that this is a security threat to this nuclear armed state is remarkable. I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about, if you're willing, to now transfer that, because you already mentioned one of your colleagues who is in prison now, the threat to the broader civil society organizations because of these designations, because as you've described, which is why I was hoping you would talk about it, these different layers that Palestinians are subjected to, legal layers, whether it's the Israeli civil law, Israeli military occupation law, the implications for the organizations. By simply reporting the truth, you are at risk. And that's deliberate. The point is to silence your organization and other organizations. Can you talk a bit about that, the potential risk now of being a member of an illegal organization, what that means?
Of course, the serious implication is the arrest and the use either administrative detention or charges and sentencing you for long sentences, because theoretically, according to the Israeli anti-terror law and the military orders, myself, because I'm the director of Damir, I could be sentenced for 20 years imprisonment for being the director of illegal organization. This is a very serious issue. They can use this anti-terror law on the level of breaching the allegiance to the state, even against me, because I have the Israeli citizen. I'm not like Salah, my colleague, a permanent resident in East Jerusalem. I was born inside the state. My family still lives in the Galilee. We have Israeli citizen, but this citizen could be taken, confiscated, based on the fact that I'm directing Damir as a terrorist organization. This is with a very serious implication on you as an individual, in your families. Another colleague of mine, her husband was arrested 2 weeks ago. He's one of the hunger strikers currently. Her husband was an ex-prisoner that already he spent the 18 years sentence, and he was released last year. They got married, and a year after he was rearrested to be sent 2 weeks ago for 6 months administrative detention based on secret information, not disclosing what this guy did in this year of freedom while he was busy preparing for being married. My colleague would be forced to deliver their first baby alone without her husband present beside her. This is our daily life. This is what it means to live under occupation on the daily level.
We've taken a lot of your time, and I'm hoping, and I want to thank you for your patience with us and the stories you're sharing, because they're so important. And it's important for the audience to understand about the daily life that Palestinians have to endure, how the different structures of oppression are used, legal, physical, in the case of the checkpoints. So it's not just how these broad categories of security are used to target children, to target professionals, to target everyone. You mentioned now a couple of times this revolving door of administrative detention, how an individual will be arrested, they will be held for a number of years, in this case, 18 years, released, and then rearrested on secret evidence, where agreements will be made for someone under hunger strike. We will release you, and surprise, there's a new case. Can you talk a little bit about that, the frequency? There seems to be a specific tactic that's used, again, to keep Palestinians constantly under threat, constantly feeling insecure, constantly under pressure.
Of course, all these children that they would be facing the imprisonment, lots of them, they would be affected seriously for their whole life, because some of them, they will never go back to school. The disorder that they would have after the release would be serious in some cases, that people decided to be totally isolated. And if you choose to continue your life as normal as you can, you could be arrested as a student in your university, because being active in the universities is illegal according to the military orders. So again, you could be facing imprisonment. Some students' cases that we are following, people took them 14 years to graduate from their first degree because they were subjected for administrative detention every 2 or 3 years. They were spending 2 years, 3 years in detention to be released for several months, like 4 months, 5 months, to be rearrested based on secret information, and again and again and again. You could be facing the two different procedures in the same time. We had cases just this year, and in relation to the case of the organizations, a Palestinian old lawyer, he's around 80 years old, was arrested last November 2021, facing charges of being involved in the work of the organizations that were designated. And the court, when we were arguing, but these allegations against him are old, how come, because they were claiming since 2000, we are talking about 20 years of activities, and they charged him just in November 21. We succeeded to release him on bail because the court said it's not very serious that justifies keeping him in detention till the end of the trial. So instead of releasing him immediately, the military prosecutor managed to guarantee 6 months administrative detention. And the poor man was kept under administrative detention, facing the trial on the charges and under administrative detention. So the military prosecutor were starting, and he was threatening to open a hunger strike immediately. So the military prosecution were trying to reach a deal that we agree, he agrees to admit guilt in order to be sentenced for 8 months. He said, no way, I did nothing wrong. There's no justification. Keep me in administrative detention. And they kept him in administrative detention the first 6 months. They renewed the administrative detention for another 6 months. So then the detainees said, if you're not releasing him, we will open hunger strike, all of us, all the 450 administrative detainees. He's 80 years old. So they forced them to limit the second order for 2 months. At the end, the guy spent 8 months, the exam, the same exact period that the military prosecutor requested as a sentence for the charges. He was released from the administrative detention. The file is still open in the military court. This is another example how the system can work, how they are twisting and manipulating, amending the laws, changing the procedures, all in one point to protect their interests, to guarantee as much as they can the maintenance of the occupation, the continuity of the oppression over the Palestinian people, and the control, so they can finish their annexation plan.
I'm cognizant of your time. I'm hoping you'll bear with us for just a few questions from the audience, if that's possible.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. This has been devastating, but very enlightening, and we can't thank you enough for all of the work that you're doing, and your organization is doing, and all the organizations are doing. So we know one question that has come in, if I can ask, is to talk about the support your organization has received since being targeted. This is international support. And how do you hope to build on this? And then there's another question that builds on something I asked you about legal recourse. So do you want to take the first one, and then we can come back to the legal recourse one again?
Yeah, I think the strength we feel came from the solidarity and the support. To be honest, from day one, when the designation decision was published, immediately international organizations, international groups, grassroots groups, diplomats were very supportive. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty immediately issued their statement condemning the decision and supporting clearly these organizations, Israeli human rights organizations. So this support protected us. The fact that we decided not to be involved in the legal procedures because we don't trust that we could succeed in such procedures in front of the High Court or the military procedures. So in order to continue, we were relying on this international support came from all the different levels, and the campaign that we developed jointly with all these friends around the world, that it continued. But of course, this is alone couldn't protect us. The fact that Israel, and actually the peak of this support came on the diplomatic level, actually, with the statement issued by 10 European countries in July this year, saying their position clearly that they will continue supporting, I mean, even financially, because some of these countries are donors for the 7 organizations. So the fact that they decided to continue to work with us and to fund us and to say it clearly was very helpful. But it seems that this was the main reason why Israel decided to raid the offices a month after, in order to send a message to the Europeans: we will continue with our decision, we will not back up, it doesn't matter for us your position, you can decide to continue to support them. For us, they are terrorists, and we will shut down these offices.
I'm so glad you made that connection between the statement by the 10 European countries and then the raid. And of course, it seems that this is also about targeting. It's not the amazing work you're doing, which is to hold Israel accountable for the plethora of violations of international humanitarian law, violations of their own law, violations of Palestinian human rights, but also to prevent funding for your organizations in the future, to prevent you from providing reporting to the ICJ, providing reporting to organizations, and working with organizations like Amnesty and Human Rights to be a presence on the world stage in the international human rights community, but also to target funding for you. Can you talk a little bit about that, just as a follow-up?
Yes, of course. And actually, the attack is not just against the Palestinian organizations. We should be very aware and take this in consideration, that actually the attack is also about the funds and the investment that the international community is supporting the Palestinian people in the development, because all of our work is about human rights, development, whether in the health sector, the education, the agriculture, the environment, all of our work as civil society at the end is funded by the international community, whether states or international organizations. I should say clearly, the fact that these states, including the United States, were silent before about other violations that at some point affected directly their projects. Some of the European projects with the Palestinian Education Ministry in building schools in Area C were demolished by the Israelis, and the Europeans never requested compensation from the Israelis. We're never finding Israel accountable for these practices. This is what gave Israel a green light that they can continue with this policy without any kind of hesitation. Like they don't think that they should be under the international law equally as any other state in the world. This has encouraged them to go further in their violation. And this is why it's very important and very essential, not just to declare your position. It's not enough to have the statements, with all the respect to the statement coming from the European countries. And we told them this is very important, very supportive, but it's not enough. It will not cause Israel to stop and to cancel their practices. It will not protect us as human rights defenders, as civil society in Palestine. You should use your diplomacy in order to make Israel accountable, in order to force Israel to respect the international law and the basic rights of the Palestinian people. And on the financial element, the fact that the United States don't have a very specific position on this case, declared in a very powerful statement, saying that they don't take the Israeli story and they don't believe the Israeli story, and they refuse to take this designation, will enable Israel always to pressure and manipulate, especially banks on the international level. This is the most useful thing for them, is to make all the financial system in the world affected by their decision, because banks will be afraid to work with us if the situation, if this status quo will continue. Soon or later, the banks in the United States or in Europe or in any other place will be afraid to be involved with work with these organizations because of the consequences, because of the lawfare, the legal suits that the Israeli groups like NGO Monitor, UK Lawyers for Israel, and all the other groups that they were initiating and doing for long years now. This is why I said it's not the first time, it will not be the last time. We were under attack, we and our partners, like even organizations in the United States, the Carter Center, were attacked by these pro-Israeli groups. Amnesty, Christian Aid, I can count tens of international organizations that they were facing legal cases, smear campaigns, intimidation, because they continued working and supporting the Palestinian organizations.
It's a really important point that you've just made. And I want to connect it back, because the point you've made is really good, which is that what we've seen, especially since the beginning of the second intifada, is the billions of dollars in assistance that's come in for capacity building, to build infrastructure, whether it's education, schools, legal systems. Everything that has come into Palestine has been constantly and steadily demolished and eroded. And yet the donors do not ask for compensation. The donors do not step up to the plate to tell the Israelis that you need to be held accountable. They don't hold them accountable at all. You've made the other point, which I think is really important to follow up on, that to your point earlier, that your bank accounts were frozen in the Arab Bank. This was a test. This was one of these early tests that was attempted. And then, of course, to now try and watch them do it again with this broad-based label that will, of course, impact banks in the United States and Europe. I want to thank you again. I want to give you a chance to have the last word. If there's anything you'd like to say toward the end, or if you're willing to take another question or two, it's up to you. I know how busy you are. So
if there's other questions and you think we can answer, yeah, please.
Sure. So because Islam, we lost the connection with Islam, and because of your involvement with the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, do you want to talk about the impact daily? He was beginning to talk about this impact daily on farmers, on the environment of course, Israel's what is now an annexation. You've talked about the legal annexation. Do you mind talking a little bit about what this means on the ground, separating Palestinians from their land in the same way that that the same kind of legal regimes are being used to separate them from their families and separate them from each other?
Actually, in the case of the agriculture work union committees, it's more powerful. The annexation and how the annexation plan is totally connected to the designation of the organizations, because all of their projects, as Islam was starting to talk about, is in Area C, actually, the same area that Israel is looking for annexing to the Israel, to the state, and controlling and keeping the Palestinians in the main cities, in the Pentostans, with the wall and the bypass roads network and the checkpoint networks. So projects like investing in reconstruction of land, in enabling, like they're supporting the farmers to reach physically, they're opening agriculture roads for the farmers. They're supporting them with new technologies of farming in order to adopt the changes on the environment in the Palestinian areas. They have the bank of seeds in order to keep our heritage in the agriculture practice, and all these projects would be seriously affected. And we're talking about thousands of farmers, thousands of vulnerable families that they rely on farming as the income resource for their life would be affected if the union would be shut down and all these projects would be canceled. And actually they succeeded even before the designation, because the union were attacked by the Israeli pro-Israeli groups before the designation, and it caused all these smear campaigns, caused the Dutch government. One of the main partners of the union was the Dutch government, with projects around millions of euros to invest in the farming, in the land construction, in the development on the agriculture in Palestine, via the union that was leading projects with other 6 Palestinian agriculture organizations. The union played a huge role in this networking and coordinating vis-a-vis the agriculture ministry, the international community, and the local grassroots and other organizations. And this is why they were attacked by settlers groups, by groups like Revolving and Shurat Adin and all other Israeli right-wing groups. After the investigation that the Dutch government actually implemented for several months, a very thorough investigation in the work of OAC, unfortunately, they canceled their fund and they ended their contracts with the union, although their conclusion in their report that they couldn't find any proof for any money fraud or misuse for the funds for purposes other than the main purposes that were presented in the projects. And still they canceled, and this has affected seriously the reputation, the relation with the other donors. And this is the importance of us, I mean, like actors in the civil societies, whether in the occupied territories, whether in the United States, whether in Europe, to fight against such procedures and measures taken by states This is what I mean by manipulating the anti-terror treaties and the exploitation of the international treaties against funding terrorism. It wasn't aimed in controlling the work of the civil society, especially on very sensitive sectors like agriculture, environment, health, education, and to claim that these organizations are supporting terrorism.
Can you, that's really fantastic. Can you talk about this relationship between the settlers, the army, because we see it on the other side, as we talked about the army coming in and arresting, right? Can you talk about on the ground what this means for farmers, this relationship between the settlers and the army, and then of course the court system in seizing land, taking, like, forcing farmers off land, preventing them from farming? Can you just talk a little bit about that? I know.
Yes, of course. And this is how Damir and the union were connected on the daily level work, because some of the farmers that they would be ending arrested, because like if we take a case of a settler group attacking farmers that they are working in their land, because in areas where the villages close to the settlements, there is always these clashes where settlers attacking Palestinian farmers in order to pose them, threatening them, attacking them physically in order to take them away from their land so they can control it later. And it would be always under the eyes of the soldiers. If not supporting actively, they would just look at the scene without taking any action, protecting by their presence the soldiers' violence and the settlers' violence and attacks. And we will end up that the army will arrest the Palestinian farmers and bringing them, if the farmers dare to protect themselves or to protect their property from the settlers' attacks, they would be arrested, not the settlers, and they would be brought in front of the military courts. Several cases of Damir followed in different areas in the occupied territories of farmers that they were attacked by the settlers, and instead of arresting the settlers, we ended up trying to defend the Palestinian farmer and to prove that it was a self-defense and he was not aiming to attack the settlers.
Great. That's perfect. We can we ask about, we have a couple of questions from the audience. One is about making donations to Damir and the other 5 organizations that have been targeted. Is that still possible today? And can that information be shared? We can send it out, share it on our webpage, the Jerusalem Fund webpage, or you can mention it today. What's the best way if individuals here want to make a donation, or anybody watching, how they can make a donation?
I think this is a more sensitive, complicated issue, honestly, because I think as an organizations to donate, it's a bit more easier because you wouldn't be easily attacked if you are a registered organization. And this is why our partners are still able to work with us. I'm afraid that on the individual level, it's a bit more risky if individuals, and I don't believe that it would be technically easy, neither from our bank side that individuals end up to try to donate directly from abroad. First, we should say that we don't have a PayPal system in Palestine, so we cannot use this system. What you need to do is to do a transaction, and it will be costly and it will be a bit more risky now under this circumstances. I would recommend that if people has such initiative, they should be in touch with local organizations, like in the United States context, with organizations that they are funding Palestinian civil society, and they can decide how to channel and how to support the work. I'm afraid the public campaigns is a bit risky now. We cannot declare a crowd fund easily now in the name of Damir or DCI or any of the 7 organizations.
I'm so glad you made the point about PayPal. And this is yet another way that these kinds of labels and the pressure from Israel can pressure private corporations into just not providing support to Palestinian civil society. There's a question about a recent meeting between the EU and the Israeli government and it also connects to the question about legal recourse.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about that and what that may mean for the organizations, for your organization as well?
Actually, it was so surprising for us as Palestinian civil society to see the EU decision to reconvene the European Council with Israel. You know, this process is related to the commercial agreement and all the relations between Israel and the EU as a body. So this council meetings that used to take place very often in regular basis in order to put strategies, how to collaborate, how to build development projects, and how they can use these collaborations in the best way, were stopped for the last 10 years. They were never convening and having, and of course, the council have subcommittees. One of the subcommittees is the Human Rights Committee, where the EU has the opportunity to force Israel to respect human rights in order to continue the collaboration between Israel and the EU. And we were trying to pressure the EU with the collaboration of the friends in the EU level, like organizations based in Europe, but unfortunately we didn't succeed to cancel the meeting. So at the end, we were requesting the EU at least to use this opportunity as a pressure on the Israeli side to make them commit and to force them to respect human rights and to respect and to stop all the serious violations that were committed at least this year. The daily raids to the Palestinian cities, the assassinations, the killings, the arrests, the arbitrary detention, the case of the NGOs. So I still think that we should pressure more and more the EU on the level of the Council, the Commission, and the parliamentarians, that they should use such opportunities, such a relation between them and the Israeli side, to make it effective, to make it more, to make the international law work, because it's a total hypocrisy. We see the EU position and the sanctions that they imposed on Russia over the occupation of Ukraine, and it's never used against Israel.
I want to follow up because this is also connected. Is we have a question here about not just about normalization generally, and then about on the ground. How has, because in the past, one of the things Palestinians could expect was support from the Arab League, support from other Arab states. How has normalization impacted this not so quiet annexation, this deliberate annexation, and the targeting of your organizations? What support has there been from the broader Arab world? What support have you received from the Palestinian Authority?
The Palestinian Authority this time were very supportive, to be honest. They were from day one in the designation. The foreign ministry joined us in the press conference, and they make it very clear that at the end, you know, I think it would be very embarrassing for the Palestinian Authority not to act in this way. At the end of the day, the 7 organizations are registered and licensed under the Palestinian law according to the Palestinian Interior Ministry. We are submitting our annual reports, financial and narrative reports, to the Justice Ministry, to the Agriculture Ministry, to the Health Ministry, to the and they all know our professionalism and our work. So not taking this position would mean they're contradicting their own procedures, their own laws, their own daily work with us. So, and I mean, their position was very important on the practical level versus the banks, because as I said, not just the Arab Bank, and what I meant in the lawfare business, you know, maybe that the Palestine Bank, Arab Bank, and other Palestinian banks were facing very serious legal cases in the United States by Israeli groups and by Israeli individuals over terrorism and all different cases. And they lost the cases. And this makes them very vulnerable. And this is why they are doing self-censorship in some cases, even without being requested clearly to take actions. And this is where the Palestinian Authority position made a difference for us. This is how we succeeded so far to maintain our bank accounts open and working as regular, because the position of the PA, the official position, made this difference that if you implement, if you take action against these organizations, this means you're violating the Palestinian law. We will go against you as a Palestinian Authority, because at the end, as a bank, you're registered and licensed by the Palestinian Authority. On the Arab region level, unfortunately, the support from the Gulf countries were not were not significant. It was mostly the civil society in the Arab world that were very supportive. With other countries, of course, that they would be more known as criticizing Israel, and they're not normalizing with the Israeli state. But mostly, I would say it came from the civil society in the Arab world, especially people that they are involved in the boycott, divestment, and in the other campaigns that they support the Palestinian work in the occupied territories.
I want to thank you again. We've taken so much of your time. This was, a devastating presentation, but very, very insightful. As Ms. Sahar Francis is the General Director of Adamir, the Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association. Thank you so much for all of your work. Thank you for joining us. Allah Tika Lafia. And we hope to see you again here, perhaps at another event, or hopefully in person in Washington. But thank you again.
I forgot to mention that I was denied entry to the United States last May, and I think this is one important consequences for all this attack against the civil society. And this is highlights the importance of the role of you, civil society organizations and grassroots and actors in the United States, to be pressuring and to take it seriously versus the State Department and other authorities. All this question of the manipulation of the anti-terror laws and the context and how it's used and manipulated in the internal discourse in the US, but also in the global level. Because I think at the end, the policy of the United States caused all these implications of the anti-terror regulations on the global level. And this is why you are responsible in order to support us as well, to put an end for such practices.
And I think I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's so important. At the same time, the State Department has been quiet. This is how this is them actually demonstrating what they believe, right, and their support for these practices and the targeting of your organization. Again, thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you do on behalf of Palestinians everywhere and Palestinians in prison, unfairly and unjustly. And thank you for your commitment to Palestinian rights. We can't thank you enough. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the Jerusalem Fund for this opportunity. It was excellent.
Thank you.